Agree.
So, for example, like if someone is a particular type of way, because usually what happens is that people would show the best version of themselves, and then it gets worse afterwards.
Yeah.
Because they can't keep that up all the time.
Agree.
So if someone's being themselves, and then the person likes them for who they are, then that's a bonus already.
Yeah.
Because there'll be, better times, worse times, and all of that stuff.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I don't. It's just a lot of effort, innit? Trying to keep up a facade that's not real.
Yeah.
And it's gonna definitely crack when there's a bit of real life happening, because you won't have the capacity to keep that up, well as keep your head above water with whatever's going on.
But I feel like some people are able to keep it up for years though.
Yeah, but then I think there's a bit of denial from the other person, because I don't think that you can truly never not see things. Do you know what I mean? I think you choose not to see things because there's a lot of other things that are handy to look past and just be like, oh, it wasn't all bad because blah, blah, blah. But actually, if you looked at that in isolation, you'd be like, oh, that shouldn't have happened.
But listen, it's good to have you here.
Thank you.
We spoke on Instagram a little bit,
We did.
Minimum, but I've liked some of the stuff you posted. I think it's very thought-provoking and it starts a conversation, which is good.
Appreciate it.
Side question.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have a podcast. Is it all females? Like, is it females only?
No, did you see the video I posted when I was pretending to be the boy?
Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't shade. But I have thus far only, like, the thing that ties my podcast together, because it's different series each time, is that every series is about things that I really care about. And I don't mean I as an individual, just as me. I mean other people like me. And I've just been getting out things that unfortunately or fortunately are women focused. But it doesn't mean that it's just going to stay like that. There are men. But the thing is, I always struggle as well. This is something you've probably heard from other women. It's very hard to be in a conversation or sort something out with a man and them not get the wrong idea, especially in this like creative space. I struggle with that. I've got, like I say to my boyfriend, that I feel like I've got one foot in the creative world, and then my other foot is very much in the corporate world. And I don't know, it's different rules in the creative world. And I struggle to know what's okay or not. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if you saw my story earlier today when I was talking about when I interact with men. By habit, I put X's at the end. Like, even when I was messaging you, Aladdin, I was going to put an X and I was like, oh shit, let me not do that, because I don't want the man to get the wrong idea. I've clearly been burnt with that a few times.
Oh yeah, listen, definitely do not put any X's, like if you're messaging a man. That's
because he's definitely going to think it's a thing. But these
not
times,
definitely, but sometimes, like for example, even me, like in the past, like someone put an X in there, I'd just be like, I wouldn't necessarily think that she likes me or anything like that, but I think like, why is there an X there? Like, what's the reason behind that?
Yeah, but as girls, you just write that of anything. You'd be like, call you back in a bit, babe. XX. Do you know
what does the X mean?
It's just polite. Like, that's how.
No, but what does it actually stand for?
It's like, it's said with a bit of love. Like, I'll call you back in a bit of love.
Is that what it stands for?
If I'm delivering something that could be a bit harsh on its own, I'll put an X there to just lighten the.
But I used to think that X's were kisses.
Yeah, they are.
Oh.
But that's what I'm saying. It's sent with a bit of love. It's like if my friend says, if we've got plans and she's got to cancel, she'll be like, I'm so sorry, I've got to cancel. And instead of just putting, I've got to cancel, that's it, she'll put an X to let me know, I'm sorry, I need to cancel. Do you know what I mean?
But I feel like some guys are desperate. So if they see an X, they think, oh my God, there's kisses.
Exactly. Hence why I don't do it. But it's annoying because my habit is just like, after I say anything, I'm just like, XX. And I'm like, oh, no, can't do that. And then I retract.
But just to be clear, like I don't mind, like I don't have an issue with someone going like, cool, I'm just gonna have all females on my podcast.
Yeah, no, it's not that though. It's like I'm very much open.
Do you think that could have happened subconsciously? Do you think maybe it's happened without you realizing?
So far, it's been conscious because the topics that I've wanted to discuss, the women or the people that I've been best placed to discuss them with have been women. Do you know what I mean? But when it comes to things like, I'm going to obviously do a lot on like male mental health and stuff like that, that's going to be men, because that's who's going to be best for it. But I think what's been nice about my podcast so far is I've been able to just have my actual friends on it, so it's been really good, and that's really helped with the dynamic as well. So that's another consideration with men. I would like to continue that on and have that dynamic, and with women I find it so much easier to build that rapport, because before they come on my podcast we can have a phone call, we might even have a few texts, we might even go to get some food. I don't feel as safe doing that with a man, because like I said, I don't want him to get the wrong idea or for it to be perceived in a way where it's like, oh, it's a, do you know what I mean? So that is a blocker. Not to say
Yeah,
it's
that's
impossible, but
interesting.
it's a blocker.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, but I think it'd be nice to kind of like break the standard or the sort of stereotype of what that means.
I agree.
Yeah.
The thing is though, I was a personal trainer before, and I got a front row seat into how it's not so much even the men, it's more how you're perceived by the man, if that makes sense. He can know full well I'd have a chance with her and she definitely doesn't fancy me and it's not that. But purely by being in that environment, it's like I've given a message that I'm on it. Do you know what I mean? When I'm not. So that's always my concern and I don't want to put that across.
But that's the thing. Like you haven't necessarily given the message because what's happened is that the man will be projecting on what they wanna see as well, what they wanna experience. So it's
Yeah.
not that you're giving the message. Sometimes it's actually there's a projection happening that shouldn't even be there in the first place. Or
So there was this was my previous podcast. There was another, it wasn't a podcast, I think he was a YouTuber and he was quite successful. And we contacted him, and as we did with loads of other people, and it was just me and two other girls on this previous podcast. And I'm the only one at the time that was in a relationship. So I was always most hesitant to be the person sending the messages, even though I was naturally the most comfortable doing it because I had a bigger following and I had more, I don't know, people in my life, I guess. I was like, can you send that message? Because if it comes from me, it's just, do you know what I mean? And then anytime I would not send the message or take off the reins, it would nothing would happen because they weren't comfortable executing that kind of conversation or whatever. But then in this one particular situation, I was just like, we couldn't have been more professional. We couldn't have been more clear about, and the guy still could only see us as women in the way of, yeah, you're going to come on the YouTube channel and do a few skits, like he's doing things where he's like taking girls on dates and that's the one you're going to come on. And these times we're talking to them about doing a podcast about like, what it's like to be a black man in society, for example. Yeah. And he's trying to tell us, oh yeah, you're just going to come look pretty and just, do you know what I mean? And
it's like super opposite of
this
of
is it.
what's
And
going
so
on.
to answer your point, whilst I wish it could be, I could challenge that, I don't have the capacity anymore to do that. So as soon as I am in a situation where I'm interacting with a man, I'm always hyper conscious to not give them any kind of thing. And often that does, I don't want to say block my blessings, but stop it from getting to a point where we could actually chop it up on a podcast, for example, because I come across like cold or rude even, but I don't, it's not because I want to be, it's because I've had too many examples of you getting the wrong idea and making it look mad when it's not. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you know what's interesting as well? Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes someone might like someone, but you could never tell.
Yeah, I need more
And
of
it's
that.
like 3-4 years.
I don't get any of
and it's
that.
like 3-4 years later, it's like I liked you. And I'm like, oh my God, I would have never. Yeah, it's
I think
impossible to
women
tell.
maybe are a bit better at hiding it
Yeah.
than men, potentially.
Yeah. So just touching on that as well. Like, do you feel like, because I've been observing like a lot of different like conversations or like even on Instagram there'll be so many different reels about women dissing men or men dissing women or saying one gender's this, one gender's that. Do you feel like there's this kind of like disagreement happening in the current?
You said this recently on another podcast. Yeah, I think that if I'm honest, I think I said this on Heber's podcast as well, that we are in a new phase of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, and we're just in our early stages of it, and we're just feeling it out, and we're not getting it right.
It's like the next generation of men and women.
Absolutely,
sort of thing.
yeah. There's no rules at the moment. All the rules that are here are brand new. Do you know what I mean? So
that's so interesting. Yeah.
Well, yeah. That's what I think.
Yeah, no, that's
I think that like, it was only, I can't remember what the statistic is, but it was only since like the 70s or something that a woman could get her own credit card, something mad like that. I think, the idea of what a relationship is so different now. So many men, not even that far back, like even like, a generation above us really have a different perception of like what the role is of a woman to hold down a relationship that isn't serving her. And now it's a brand new world where women are actually like, no, I don't want to be here anymore. And or even more perplexing to some men and women is women that are like, yeah, I don't want to be in a relationship. I'd rather be single and I don't want kids. And people just don't know what to do with that. And I see it all the time. And it's interesting because I've always been a person who has known I've always wanted to have kids and do things quite traditionally in the sense of like, that I feel that that's part of me being a woman. Personally, that's for me. But I noticed that, like, for example, when I speak to some other women who are very sure that they don't want to have kids, and even if they do, it's only because if the man that they're with, they wants to, they will. They get quite offended when I talk openly about like how I feel and how I'm like, you know, going to start having kids and blah blah. They're just like quite. Oh, they feel like I'm doing a disservice to myself because I could be doing so many other things and I'm choosing an option which doesn't really. That's what's expected of me.
Do you think it's possible? And by the way, I'm just making up a story. This is not true at all. But do you think there's a possibility that maybe subconsciously they might be like potentially jealous that you might be having kids, and then they might potentially want that too?
I think there could be the jealousy of that it's going to be easier for me. They see it as because I'm doing what's expected of me. I do get that. I think especially if you're from a certain culture where if you're within that culture, if you're from like an Asian or African background, for example, to be fair, anything non-white, anything immigrant, like any of those cultures, it's going to be expected of you as a woman to have a kid, procreate, have a relationship, marriage, man, blah, blah, blah. It's very, you know, that's what's expected. And because I've never had that enforced on me, but I've still naturally veered towards that. Women who've had it enforced upon them and don't want to do it, see it as a bit of a diss that I'm doing it and I don't even have to. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that I think there is an element of jealousy of that, like you don't even have to do this and you're doing it. Great. Whereas they would love to do what they want to do and be you know, let them get on with it, and they're not. They've got someone constantly on their case, get married or do this or do that, and so yeah, I think there's a bit of a jealousy there in that one sense.
So, but you know what? The reason I asked you that is because there was this study that came out a little while ago, and basically they interviewed like top exec women in different fields and all of that stuff, and one thing that they had in common was they were so focused on their career. And by the way, I'm not saying that's what women should do. They shouldn't do. You know, they can do whatever they want, because people take
disclaimer.
No, because I get taken out of context too. So I'm not saying what they should be doing or what they shouldn't be doing. If anything, I promote, you know, live your best life and all of that stuff. But there is that interesting part where, so they've been interviewed and all of that stuff, and one thing they had in common is that they regret not having children, and at that point it was too late. And I think there's something about it. It's like sometimes people are so caught up in all the noise of like, you know, I've got career and I'm building this different thing, and then by the time they slow down and they start realizing, they go, actually, hold on, I kind of wanted a family. I wanted to have a child.
I think that women can have everything, but not at the same time. And that's why, again, I get a lot of heat from people who are maybe my age or slightly older, because they're like, oh, why are you so focused on having kids? Why are you so focused on this? Why are you so focused on that? Or the one I get the most is, oh God, you've done so much for your age, which is just, I find that so jarring. But anyway, I know they mean it as a compliment, but that's because I've been aware of that, what you've said, that it is harder, or what I said rather, for me as a woman to have everything at the same time. It's not going to happen. I need to work twice as hard. This is a man's world. And therefore I've planned, or attempted to plan, because you can't plan life, as much as I can to get everything I need to do done so that I can do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And people get quite offended by that, and they're just like, oh, you can't plan everything. It's like, I know I can't, but what I can, I'll try. Do you know what I mean? And like I said, I was a personal trainer, and I was a pre and postnatal trainer specifically. And all of my clients were women who were 45 plus, having their first kids at 45 plus, struggling. They've got all the money in the world. They're top execs, big bread, and they struggle because they struggle with fertility. They struggle with potentially when the kid's here, like,
and the bread doesn't really matter at that point. I mean, it still does, but it kind of like, it doesn't, you know, if they're struggling with particular things, sometimes it's better not to struggle with it than have bread. I don't know, but this
is what I'm saying. And that was something where it's like, again, when I'm talking about women that are getting offended when I speak about these things, it's pretty often women who I'm in work with and interacting with, and I work in tech. So they're like, there's so much money to be made. Why would you stunt your opportunity by having a kid? Why would you do that? That's how they see it. And it's like, for me, because I know that's what I want, I don't see it as stunting. But because it's not what you want, that's why you see it as stunting. Do you know what I mean?
But sorry, go on.
Yeah, so I think that there definitely isn't enough thought about what people want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that if women were honest, a lot more women wouldn't actually want to have kids, and what stops them from thinking about it is that they deep down feel like they have to at some point, because they have to please a mother, a partner, or whatever. So they're like, do you know what, I'm not going to find out if I've got any fertility issues, I'm not going to find out this, I'm not going to find out that, because I'll just wait until it happens, and if it doesn't happen kind of thing. But they don't realise the gravity of that decision, because like you say, you can turn around in 10 years and actually think, do you know what, I would have liked to have had a family, and I would have liked to have this, and now you can't because you didn't take those steps. Do you know what I mean? But at the same time as well, I'm so behind women who are really clear that they don't want to, because I think raising kids is something that a lot of people don't take as seriously as they should, and we're raising the next generation, or you're supposed to be. And if a lot of people, it's another hard truth, if a lot of people were very honest in our generation and before, a lot of mums didn't want to have their kids because they were forced to. They were in horrible relationships. They were in, do you know what I mean? And to sit with that is hard, because then you might think back to your own situation and be like, was I actually, do you know what I mean? It's hard. But I think it's good that women are now finally having the chance to be like, yeah, I don't want to repeat that, and I don't want to have them, and that's it.
So there's two things here. Number one, like at one point it said that this is a man's world. Like, what do you think it makes a man's world?
There's things that me as a woman I'm intrinsically different to men. Number one, like easiest one, I have periods per every single month for at least 2 to 3 days. I'm gonna feel like absolute shit, and I'm still expected to work just as hard, attend, do my thing, blah blah blah. And if I say, I'm on my period, whatever, even other women, because we've been so conditioned, will be like, oh my god, your period, we've all had periods, what are you talking about, oh my god, blah blah blah, go on the pill. Do you know what I mean? It's just such a like shrugged off thing. I will earn less than a man, typically, in like whatever field you're in. There's a gender pay gap. I'm not, the fact that my body is different is not accounted for. I can hold and give birth to babies, and I'm still expected to get back to work whenever, or not, and then not complain that I don't have money. Do you know what I mean? It's very like, when it comes to women, it's very little conversation or thought. It's not been designed. That's what I'm saying. It's just not been designed with women in mind. It's been. That's why I say I can't say it's been designed with men in mind, but I just know it hasn't been designed with me in mind. So if it's not been designed for me, then it's probably been designed for you. And I do see it, and that's why it's so much easier for men to thrive, to own, to buy, to whatever it is, because it's more. It makes the world easier for them, basically.
I don't know. I mean, so I'm not saying I disagree. I'm not saying I agree. I'm exploring what that means at the moment. So for instance, like in my workplace, I know there's women that earn more than me that are doing similar things. So I'm not. So I feel like there'll be different conditions or circumstances where a man might be earning more or vice versa. But I don't think it's entirely true that a man earns more in all cases or all scenarios. I think there are differences.
Yeah, on a majority, on like a world scale, is the case. Small nuances, day to day, 100%. Like, I'm in the same situation where I earn more than some men at my work and whatever. But in that scenario you gave with that, women that you work with, they could get pregnant. You can't get pregnant. And if they did get pregnant, they're still going to be expected to work till a certain amount of time, and to be with the baby for only a little bit before their pay dries up and they have to get back crack into it. That intrinsically is a difference. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But then what about maternity versus? But I don't make this conversation about man versus women. By the way, I'm just.
No, I know. I didn't know
just to be clear, because I know people sometimes take things out of context. But what about maternity and paternity leave? Because I feel like men get like, I think what's it like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Compared
I think that's
to
really bad. Yeah, absolutely. But
because I'm sure there's men that want to be at home with the baby as well.
I think that is a reflection of society, where it's the expectation that men won't or don't want to, which isn't the case, or has changed. Maybe it was the case and it's not anymore. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that's mad and this is in like big companies like Google, for example, PwC, 2 weeks for paternity, which is mad. Like, those places, do you know what I mean? And they give women in some of those places a year or 6 months.
It's almost like it's saying that men don't want to be with a kid. Like, what?
Or it's a woman's job to be the one to be at home.
But yeah, I feel like to some extent, I'm not saying, I feel like women are more nurturing anyways. Or would you disagree with that?
It's hard because
Yeah.
me, yes, I feel, and I like, feel that blah blah blah,
Mm.
but I do know some women where that's not the case, and it doesn't make them any less women.
Yeah.
It just means that they're not that way inclined, and that's fine.
So would you say most or some women then? Because I stopped saying all women or all men
I think
because it
some
doesn't
women,
apply to everyone.
No, I think some women are not nurturing, and I think that the majority are, but some aren't.
But then in overall scenario, would you say women are more nurturing than men, like in general, or would you disagree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
But I also think that everyone has different versions of what nurturing means.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There's like, for me, nurturing is more about emotional intelligence and capacity and what you give that. And in my own case, absolutely, my mum's way more than my dad. And my dad would say, growing up, I'm not good at this. You have a mum. That's what she's for. So in my own reality, yeah, but I've seen examples where the man's been way more emotionally there for the kids and whatever than the woman.
But say that's
it's rarer, yeah.
I feel like it's even the emotional intelligence thing. Like, so from my experience, I do some work with young men as well. Like from my experience, and I've worked with a lot of them. Like, I feel like men are less emotionally intelligent.
Yeah.
Or they don't develop as much as women might do.
Do you think it's because that's not expected of them?
No, I just feel like we just grow up differently. It's
Okay.
like I think we get conditioned from a young age, right? It's like there's the whole thing. I think someone's done like a study where they gave babies like different toys and stuff like that. But basically from young, it's like, we get cars as toys, toy cars and stuff like that. So from young, we start getting conditioned. Okay, cool, we need to get a car, this or that or whatever. It's just like, we play with Superman figures and all of that stuff to be like all the superheroes or whatever. Then you have to be a particular type of way.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a difference from a young age, because automatically, like, when people have kids, like, they already buy toys based on the gender.
Yeah, but when I say the emotional side, I mean, like, you see how people say protect your daughters, but actually should be educate your sons, so that I don't need to protect my daughter. Do you know what I mean? So that's what I'm saying by, like,
I like that.
Yeah, there's an expectation that the man, boys will be boys. Oh, you know what he's like. Do you know what I mean? We can all, in our own homes, like, we know that the boy typically is more allowed. He's more. No one's gonna check him as much, basically. Whereas the girl, like, all that conversation about the eldest daughter, she's always the one who's got to be holding it together, doing the best example, doing this, doing that. And I think that, for me, is where it starts when we talk about conditioning. It's that instant, like, lack of expectation on you as a man to be, I don't know, like, better.
Do you know what's interesting? That comes from parents, though.
Does, yeah.
That's
absolutely.
like parental conditioning. And a lot of times, like, I see, like, even like all the way down to like career pathways, it's like parents will want, like, the kids to do particular things because of the gender. It's actually crazy when I think about it.
Yeah.
On a side note, what kind of I've got an opinion on this anyway, so that's what I'm asking. But what kind of men do you think women are into or women want? That was a deep.
This is hard. I think that this is controversial. We complicate it more than it needs to be, and I think every woman and equally every man just want to be loved, but because we're in this world, this new generation thing, whatever, we've become very confused about what that is, and we attach different things to it, and it's almost like we've compromised on the love thing. Everyone's just like, oh yeah, I know I'm not going to get a guy who's like not going to cheat on me, for example. So I don't mind as long as he's got bread, or I don't mind as long as he hides it. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of differences where we've just actually we need to go back to basics, which is, do you treat me well? Yes. Do you respect me? Yes. Do we enjoy each other's company? That should be it. Do you know what I mean? So I think deep down, that's all women and men want. But on the surface, women want an alpha, a money man, someone who's going to put them in their place. Also someone who's a bit road. Like, there's loads of this stuff. But reality is, if a woman comes into contact with a man who really, really cares about her and shows her that, not just with words but with actions, and if a man is the same and finds a woman who's going to do the same, then everyone's good. But that doesn't happen. in the purest form. So that's why we dress it up with like, have they got this? Have they got that? Is she pretty? That's what we do. When actually it's as simple as that.
Yeah, I get that. I think they want a stable man, so someone that's got stability. I think stability is very important, and I kind of use this metaphor of a table. So if you have a round table, let's say with like 6 legs on there, and let's say one leg is like maybe physical health, that one is mental health, that one is finance. I don't know. That one is, I don't know, what is it, loyalty, whatever the legs are. And I realized I've started noticing it with people in relationships in general. Like sometimes a woman will settle for the table that has maybe one leg is missing or one leg is unstable. So the table's wobbly and they'll sit there for time. They'll be like, I'm going to stay at this table for a little bit. The table seems nice. But then because it wobbles so much, after 5 years, they go, you know what, I can't part with that one leg. It's not stable.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think stability is very important.
Yeah, I think so, but I think that comes in different forms. And I think often when you hear stability, everyone's going to, when they listen or watch this, they're going to be like, finances. But it doesn't always mean financial stability. Mental stability, emotional stability.
But that's the thing, so that finance, that leg, which is the finance, might be a bit wobbly, but everything else is stable. So
yeah,
they
absolutely.
might be like, you know what, maybe we can fix the leg. Maybe that's something that's fixable. To be honest,
absolutely.
all of them are. So
yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So I guess it's just, it's down to the women if they want to stay at that table or with that table.
Do you think men choose the woman or a woman chooses a man?
So I have an opinion which is controversial, but most women agree with that I've spoken to. I think women hold the keys to sex, and I think men hold the keys to relationship. Which you might not agree with. Yeah, I don't know.
I agree.
Yeah. So it's pretty straightforward. Yeah,
So
and I think obviously I think relationships built from both sides. Anyways, it takes two sides to build a bridge. But I think what I'm talking about in initial stages.
What? So if a man doesn't make it official, it's not official.
Yeah, and then I've seen that before. Like I've seen that happen with some of my friends. That happened with me actually before, like once. Yeah, if it's like if the man is like, I don't want this relationship, then the relationship doesn't happen.
I definitely think
because I feel like, so just to add a little bit on top of that. So I feel like if a woman is having sex with that man, then I think not in all cases, but in most cases, she's already interested in him, and she already wants to have something with him. And then the man might be like, you know what? The man might do a 360 and be like, you know what? I'm not interested or whatever.
Yeah, I think that women do attempt more than men do to force men into relationships when they don't want to be there. Because they, like we were saying earlier, they look at the little things and they're like, oh, but he this and he did that. But he's openly said, I don't want a girlfriend right now, which means I don't want you to be my girlfriend. It doesn't mean right now. That's it. And men don't do that as much. I feel like when you say to a man, I don't want to be with you, he might give it a bit of chat and be like, oh, it would be so good though, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, he'll still be chatting to other gal because he's just like, oh, it's not going to happen with you. That's fine. Do you know what I mean? It's rare for some, it's more often that women stop their lives and focus wholeheartedly on this one man and trying to convert him into wanting to be in a relationship with you than men do. I have seen in my own experience.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's a fact. That's just what my opinion is.
Yeah, that's interesting. So do you know what? So I think just with this conversation in general, I've been thinking about it quite a bit, just the whole like men versus women thing. And a little while ago, I said, you know what? Let me sign out. So I'm still having this conversation. I'm still up for conversations anyways in general about it. But I'm signing out the whole like concept of like men do this, women do this, and I start looking at individuals. So I kind of now just go, I just look, okay, cool. What is that individual doing? Because what I realize is that most individuals will have like different perspectives or different ways. There are some general things that happen, but at the end of the day, everyone's so custom. It's just like they have, yeah, exactly. They have like their own belief templates, even though there are some universal things. There's even that thing of like, so that's what science says. Science says that women and men have different amounts of white and grey matter.
You spoke about this before as well, yeah.
Yeah.
I listened to your stuff, boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, God.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So there is that element of like, cool, we are different.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's that thing of like, when people talk to each other, like they want people to be the same as them. It's just like, it makes no sense.
Yeah, I think you have to be very resolved in yourself, and I'm closer to it than I ever have been.
Mm.
But it's a constant job to always be like, you know, I was speaking to my therapist yesterday about I struggle with expectations of people, and I get upset when people don't love me the way I would love or do love them, with friends especially. Family members not so much. Friends, I get it hard, where like, you know, I could be, if a person knows my life and they know like things I deal with, for example, I take it as a diss if they don't check in on me, or they don't. And I'm not a person that can even cope with too much like contact with people, because I get like too overwhelmed. I'm too busy, I can't. But if you know what's going on in my life and you don't regularly check in, or you don't regularly like see if I'm all right, I take that as a diss, and then I start getting resentful, and my natural self is to be like, you know, still trying to meet up with this person, whatever. But then the other side of me is like, no, I'm not a dickhead. I'm not going to keep. And then it's like a constant battle. So then my therapist was saying, you have to start seeing that you can't expect people to be just like you, and you can't expect them to show up for you how you would show up for them. And where you might, you know, I could be going through something and a friend might be like, know all about it and speak to me just before I've got to do something major. I might then do the major thing. Me, if it was her the other way around, I would have called up and been like, how did that major thing go? Are you all right? What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. She won't do that. And I'm like, she knows I've been going, she knows I've done this, she knows that she hasn't called me. But then what she might do is, in like a year, she might be like, oh, let's spend a whole day talking about this, which I wouldn't do. Do you know what I mean? So it's very hard to, just to your point of like understanding that everyone's different. We understand it on the surface, but we don't really understand it. To understand it, you have to see how that affects you. How are you affected by the fact that we're all different? What is it in you that gets angry when someone does this or does that, and why is that?
So I like to refer to that as unwritten rules. So they're literally rules that, you know, that are unwritten, and every single individual's got a different set of them. And actually where they kind of like stem from are values and boundaries. So you might have a value which is like you check in with people. That's one of your values.
Exactly.
But what happens is that everyone's got different value sets. So and the reason it's an unwritten rules, I'm sure you communicated with some of your friends in the past and stuff, but if you don't communicate that, then it's an unwritten rule.
Yeah.
And going back to the expectation thing, it becomes this thing of, okay, cool, you're expecting everyone to have that same thing.
Exactly.
It's not possible. You know, it's just a projection.
But what if you say to the person, this is my thing, I don't know what's a fine line between me getting taken for a mug or or the people just being different, and that's okay.
But you know what? Can I just say something that, they're taking themselves for a mug. So it's that thing of like, if, you know, let's say for example, and I know it's going to sound a bit weird, but if someone's cheating on someone in a relationship, or even if someone's cheating in anything else, let's say they're doing exercise and they're doing a particular, you know, they're meant to do like, I don't know, 10 press ups, they do 8, whatever, and they're cheating, they're not necessarily cheating the other person. They're kind of cheating themselves realistically, because what they're doing, they're compromising their own internal values and they're letting themselves down. Because if they're cheating on someone else and the person finds out, they're the ones that are going to lose their relationship potentially. You know, if they're going to do something else, or they don't get, you know, they don't work hard in the gym, they're the ones that's losing the physical gain. So at the end of the day, it's just, you know, it's down to the individual. So like if someone's taking you for a mug, they're missing out on an amazing relationship they might have with you as a person. So realistically, they're taking themselves for a mug.
I know, yeah. And that's ego. That is what will get in the way for me. And taking it personal. That's my other thing. I take things personally. And it's like, I need to now, the next stage of who I evolved me is trying not to take things as personal. Because I just feel like, do you not know who I am? But really, it's that, like you say, they don't know who themselves are. So how are they going to know who I am?
Yeah. And I think for me, I'm lucky that I figured this out time ago, because I got to the point where like, I actually don't give a shit. So like if someone does something, like cool, like it's not that big of a deal. Like I just move on from it. And there is a little bit of that. I think people need to be, like when it comes to trust and stuff like that, people need to be able to take the risk. It's not about the other person providing their safe space or creating an environment where people can just kind of like, you know, be truthful and like be trustworthy, all of that stuff. I think it's about, am I willing to take a risk? And I think if I'm not willing to take a risk, if I'm not brave enough to take that risk, then I'm going to be stuck within wherever I'm at in general, whether it's relationships or finance or career, whatever it is. It's about being brave enough to go, you know what, I need to take that risk and see how it works out. There's only one way to find out.
Yeah, agree.
That's how trust is built in general.
Yeah, agree.
But listen, how do you get your feeling of importance?
I knew it was gonna come.
At some point, it's meant to come time ago.
Yeah,
But
literally, because I get offended because people always want me to come on like these conversations and speak like about women, and I'm like, mate, is that all I?
Oh,
I'm
listen,
here
can
to
I just be clear? Yeah, that's not my intention at all. The reason I asked for your opinion on that topic in general is because we don't get enough women on the podcast, and there's a couple of women that said, oh, you need to get more women on there to represent women as well, because there's been a couple of guys that's on here the same things about women. So
true.
I wanted to get your perspective on it as well.
Fair
That's what it was. It's not like, oh, I want you to talk about women. You're more than that. And
thank you. So how do I get my importance? My importance comes from self-awareness and really being unapologetically myself, which sounds very corny, but when I am unapologetically myself, I'm like a magnet. People are very drawn to me when I'm in that place. But I guess what I have to do is always do whatever it needs to be done to be in that place, because that's who I really am. And then also not give too much of myself out to people to preserve that. So I get my importance really from doing the work on myself and seeing my improvements. And that doesn't just mean, when I say that, people always think I mean like from a money or work perspective, but actually I mean it from like a inner contentment,
like intrinsic, like it's internal, and you don't rely on external sources to get that.
Totally.
I think that's beautiful.
Thank you.
No, honestly, like I was having a conversation with someone today and was talking about so how people sometimes will rely on other people to go to the gym or have accountability. Like someone was talking, like, oh, I need someone for accountability, and I was saying like I always like promote like people should have their own internal validation and accountability, or anything that's internal first.
Yeah, but I controversially feel like you can only get that. It's a bit like a something more positive than mold, but mold. You see, like how if you have one fruit going off, it's going to make every other fruit moldy. It's like that. So the reason I feel like I have that internal validation is because I've always been validated in the very like loving way from like my mum, for example, and that's made when my peers, or not just mum, like parents, family, whoever, friends, when my peers who may not have had that pure validation, they can't now recognize a man's lustful validation for the real. Do you know what I'm saying? So they think that the likes or the comments or whatever is real validation because they don't have a bar of what real validation is. So I feel like to grow your internal validation, it has to have been role modeled to you somewhere by you receiving it from someone, in my opinion, because otherwise you're not going to have it's not impossible, but it's going to be a lot harder because you're not going to have like a blueprint kind of thing.
Well, people that start for validation, those are the people that usually get groomed.
Yeah.
And grooming doesn't necessarily have to be negative all the time, but it can be positive sometimes.
Do you think?
Yeah,
grooming can be positive?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, what?
Like that's what really. So, for example, in the youth work industry, youth workers groom. Like I know it sounds mad, but they groom them for positive purposes.
I would call that guide.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's this, we're talking about the same thing. It's just people have a negative connection to what the word groom means, and that happens with a lot of different words. They're not necessarily negative. It's just because we talk about negative things, or we use that word for negative explanation. But the word itself is just a word. Yeah. It's just there's an action that means it means someone being in a position where they're looking for that guidance or whatever it is that they're looking for, and someone can give that to them. But then, sometimes they get groomed for, in a negative way, sometimes in a positive way. And I would debate that both of the types of grooming happens on a sort of equal scale anyways.
Yeah,
just no one pays attention to the positive one because it's positive, innit? It's like, who cares?
I mean, any kind of influence is grooming, really. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah. So for all the influencers out there online, stop grooming.
Oh, God. That was a brave thing to say on your podcast.
Stop grooming people, but yeah. Anyways, I had another question for you, so let me just put it up.
How did you get your importance as well, by the way?
How did I get my importance? Let me see. That is a great question. Where'd you get that question from?
Oh, someone said it to me.
I love it. How did I get my importance? I think for me, my feeling of importance is a combination of both. So meaning I have a balance of being selfish and selfless. So I do things for myself that can also elevate other people at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like I would explain it in a way where, like, you know, if the lift comes down, like I'll find a way to elevate myself within that lift, and I'll get other people to jump on that lift as well. And there's and you know what? And there's also a level of and you said, you know, actions speak louder than words. So I'm gonna say it, but I usually demonstrate that through actions. But I have this like level of genuine empathy and care, or like genuine intention. So when I tell people, I say like, there's no conditions or no nothing. Usually people don't believe me, or
That's
they think,
very powerful, because I think unfortunately so much is transactional, and that's another thing that makes it harder. I was just speaking about at the beginning about women and men interacting. There's been so many times in my life where men have been appeared to hold out like an opportunity or a branch to me and be like, oh, I'll just pattern blah 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 and you can da da da, and I'll be like, oh, brilliant. And then it will be because they then want to go on a date, or do you know what I mean, something like that, and I'm just like, oh mate. So to know that people still understand what like transaction free and just genuine helping people out or being there for someone means is nice.
Yeah, and you know what? Like I'm proud of it. Like I'm really proud of it. And you know what? To some extent, it's going back to the feeling of importance. Like knowing that I'm a very small part of like minority that can do that. Like I feel empowered. But you know what? By the same time, I wish everyone else done it too. It's my unwritten rule. It's like sometimes I don't attach conditions. So like when someone goes, "Oh, you haven't messaged me for 3 days," I'm like, "But I wouldn't tell you if that was the case." But again, I haven't communicated that. That's my unwritten rule. So. But being unconditional is quite difficult.
Yeah, very hard, especially when you've not been raised that way. And I didn't realise how conditional I've been loved until I started living with my boyfriend, because there's so much I do that is conditional and I don't even realise it. Like I'll just, you know, come in from the kitchen to the living room and bring his tea in that he hasn't asked me to do, and then he'll just be like, okay, because he hasn't asked me, so he's just like, all right. And then when he gets up, I'll be like, oh, can you grab me a blah, blah, blah. I brought your tea in, so... And I won't even be conscious that I've done that. And then he's just like... And honestly, it's only been since I've been in with him, I'm just like, rah, I do so much of it. And now, when I have interactions with my mum, I so see it so much more, because she'll just be like, yeah, I'll bring blah, 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 blah for you. Or if we have dinner at mine, for example, she'll be like, do you think you need me to bring? And I'll be like, oh... Or she'll just bring something, and then now there's the expectation on me to, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a condition. It's like if someone does it to get something back later on, that's just bottom line condition.
I think again, as immigrants, we've had to rely on that. That's been like our oxygen. Do you know what I mean? So it's hard to see if that's transactional and conditional or just helping each other out.
But you know what? But I think so. I agree and I disagree with you. So I think I understand what you're saying. So there's an element of truth to that, as in like, you know, that's what you've learned.
That's how you grow.
At the end of the day, that's not something you have to accept.
That's it.
You know,
boundaries.
You don't have to accept that. You know, you can make a change.
I know.
And I think sometimes as people we fall into categories of like, oh, that's the thing there, and people just go, I'm going to accept it as it is. But actually, hold on, we can change that. We can write a different narrative. We can change that story.
You only don't have a choice when you don't make it.
I like that.
Thank you.
I like that. But yeah, no, seriously, yeah, the whole condition thing is like, it's fascinating. It's something I've been exploring a bit more recently. But yeah, do you have so just going back to your podcast as well, I wanted to ask you this earlier. Do you have you had a guest that maybe like impressed you the most, and you know, someone that maybe you didn't think they would have, or they shared something really powerful?
So Psycho, she's the second series about politics. I did not think she would impress me, but she struggles sometimes to really expose her greatness. So I didn't know she would bring it. Do you know what I'm saying? She has it there, and one-on-one, I'm like blown away by her. But I don't always see it come through, because there's some kind of like, I don't know, we speak about it on the podcast anyway, and like we have these conversations all the time. You should get her on, by the way. She's brilliant. And so I didn't know, but she really, really brought it. And I could just see throughout our recording it that she got like it reminded her how much she loves this and how she really had forgotten until that point that she's so needed, especially in right now with everything that's going on. Like it's more important than ever to know what's going on around you and know who the powers are that be and what they're doing. So it like reignited that in her, which was really, really nice. So yeah, all of my guests are incredible, disclaimer. But her in particular, that series was good, man.
But you know what, like it's also like you're facilitated a space where she can remember that.
Yeah, that's
so like and I think that's why podcasting sometimes, like, people overlook podcasting and think, oh, it's just a bunch of people sitting down having a conversation, blah blah whatever. But actually there's more to it.
100%.
Like there's people that's been on this podcast and they've had the first podcast experience, and because of that they go, actually I want to do more of this, or I've just realized this about myself and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's an experience. That's what it is. In the end of the day, it shouldn't even be called podcast, it should be called an experience.
Yeah. And I think what do you guys think about how it's so available now? I feel like even like when I did my first podcast, there was less, and now every other person is a podcaster. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I love that shit.
Really?
So number one, no, seriously, I love it. No, I love it. Do you know why? Because number one, I love the aspect of like who's gonna last longer. You know what I'm saying?
And who's here for a good time and who's here for a long time.
Yeah, who's gonna last longer? Like who's, you know, I'm trying to say what. And I think also at the end of the day, I love the fact that a lot of people are doing it because there's gonna be some learning in the process.
Yeah. I feel like podcasting is one of the few crafts left where if you're not good, you're not going to be around long. Because even when influencers try and jump on the whole thing, they can leverage their influence. They don't really get the downloads.
Well, but that's the thing. But this is where the difference is. So they do numbers in something already. Then they try to launch something. They don't do the same numbers. They go, oh, it's not working because they have a different metric. And we, you know, from early days, me and Aladdin spoke about metrics of this. Like, what is a metric for us? You know, how do you measure success? And for us, it's like, you know what? Even if one person watches it and get something from it, that's success for us.
Yeah.
And then, you know, if more people watch it, that's a bonus.
Yeah, but I feel like it's more from I agree with you, but I also feel like it's more from a perspective of, for this, what we're doing, what podcasting is, sitting and chatting is basically what it is. You have to have a level of substance. And not everybody has that, especially in the Instagram world that we live in now. So when influencers do jump on the mic and they try and leverage their followers, you quickly see, oh shit, you don't have substance. I'm not going to listen to this. And their same followers who love their pictures and their reels aren't going to spend their hour listening to them chat because there's nothing really I want to hear from you. Do you know what I mean? So it's about like knowing what you're good at and not thinking that. That's what I do like about podcasting, because like despite the fact that you might have much more followers than me or much more whatever, when it comes to listening to my stuff, people are going to want to listen to mine more than yours, for example. And that's nice.
How do you know? I'm joking.
Yeah, so.
And you know what? Like competition as well. Like I feel like competition is healthy. And I feel like it drives like. And you know what it is? Like there's also like ways of learning. Like if someone's watching someone else's podcast, I might watch yours, and then I'm like, I'm learning particular things. I'm watching something else. I'm learning something from there. And if a lot of people weren't doing it, then there's less learning, because at the end of the day, as individuals, we have our own little creative like ways of doing particular things and our own little spin on it. And I think also just what you were saying earlier with substance, I think everyone's got like a story or way of living to kind of share or to spread. And I'm not saying my way of like living is the best, but I have a way of just kind of like living with the flow of life and just, you know, appreciation for life, and in the most positive way, saying that, you know, people shouldn't care about certain things too much, or we make up too many stories about what something means instead of just enjoying life and all these different things. And I feel like, yeah, just that thing of like we miss the beauty of life, caught up in so many different things. Like people are talking about, oh, I had an argument with because of whatever, and I'm like, there's so much more to life than just some stupid argument. And I feel like when people like pass away, sometimes it's like it puts things into context for a little bit. But some people don't hold that awareness in the long run, you know?
Yeah, I don't think people practice gratitude enough. I get really irritated when people complain. I'm not to say that it's not valid, But when you look at real ones and really successful people, not just success money-wise, but success like inner contentment and the stuff we were talking about, which inevitably normally leads to money, they don't complain. Do you know what I mean? And so, like, I have a rule where, like, I complain about something max twice and then it needs to get sorted.
Yeah.
I try to live by that as much as possible. And also, the new thing as well evolved me, trying to accept that some things just don't have solutions, and that's all right. And you need to just change based on that.
No, I agree with that. I think mindset plays a big part. And actually, that thing of like doing it twice max, I think that's a really good way of looking at it, because it then becomes a muscle. I'm guessing like you then feel empowered as time goes on to do it less and less, because you're like, what's the point of complaining?
100%.
Yeah. So the first thing I started like looking at stopping complaining was around like weather changes. Because it's like, I can't control that shit anyway. So what's the point if I say, oh, it's cold, it's hot? Like, what difference does that make?
Yeah.
And that's the first thing that I've started like kind of like focusing on as well.
Yeah, I don't really complain about stuff that much apart from like family. I complain about family a lot.
Apart from like if you look out for people and they don't look out for you.
That's a biggie. Yeah.
But that's a condition as well, by the way.
True. Yeah. But yeah, I complain a lot about family. That's a biggie. But what's helped me with that is you can't change the person, and that's another thing again that therapy's helped me with, which is like therapy is amazing for learning why a person does that or why they might trigger you or why this, but it's not going to stop that from happening.
Yeah. But you can change
just
yourself.
Making you aware of it, exactly, and then
That's
you
the
now
beautiful
need
part.
to be the one to not be upset and not this and not that. So
that's the thing. Like, always have these like conversations with people, and sometimes it gets a bit repetitive, but I'm still up for challenge, and it's around like people say, oh, someone made me feel like this, or someone made me feel that type of way. I'm like, I don't believe that people can make someone feel a type of way. I believe that people can do certain things and then we choose to feel a type of way about it.
Yeah, I think you can to an extent, but I think that statement is hard for people to hear because, again, I believe your ability to deal with all these things and not be as affected and have that mindset and blah, blah, blah is from role modelling and inner work. And not everybody has access to both those things.
Well, so I would say, I think inner work, everyone has access to that.
Do you think?
Yeah, I think every single person's got access to inner work. I think whether they choose to do it or not, I think that's a different conversation.
You don't think that?
I don't think everyone has access to role models though, so I agree with that first part.
But you don't think that okay, yeah, on paper everyone has access, obviously. That people can, watch a YouTube video, read a book, blah blah blah, 100%. But the decision to put yourself first or to put yourself in that much importance that you would take the time out to read a book for yourself is a hard one for a lot of people to do. And that is dependent on where you're coming from. Do you know what I mean? Like a single mum who's escaped a war-torn country and barely has enough time to eat per day, for her to take the choice that she's going to spend an hour out of her day where she should be feeding her kids or cleaning up or whatever to read a book about self-care. Do you know what I'm saying? That's a hard thing to do. So that's why I say that it's not accessible to everyone. And I think that it is unfair that it is, why do richer people look better and whatever? Even things like skincare and shit like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's only now in my life where I've started to, I don't want to say earn a certain amount or live a certain way, where I have like little things that I care more about or I have room to care more about. That's what I think it is. I think when you have room to care about, like, oh, have I done my face roller today, or have I
Can't relate.
yeah, but do you know what I'm saying? Like things like that. Or I don't know, yours might be like, oh, have I got the newest pair of trainers, whatever it might be. When you're at that stage, then you start seeing, oh, certain people, these are all they think about. Only think about, like, have I done what's best for me today? And the majority of people who are struggling, they are last. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's what I mean when I say not everyone has access to it, because it's the first decision to choose to put yourself first, which doesn't always come.
Yeah, definitely. It's that cliche thing of like, oh, when you're in an airplane, you have to put the mask on first.
This is it, exactly.
And some people are not doing that. But that's why I think that there needs to be a balance between like how selfish and how selfless someone is. Yeah,
and also rebranding almost what selfishness means, because like you were saying earlier, when you're from certain backgrounds and you just accept, oh yeah, it would be selfish for me to not give up my Saturday because my mum wants me to help with something. Rebranding that actually you can be boundaried, and that doesn't make you selfish. Do you know what I mean? Like, if I was to say to my mum, for example, if I went to her house and didn't eat food that she'd made, she'd be offended by that, because she's like, I've just put all this effort in, and I've made food, and I've this and I've that, and you don't want it. I haven't asked for the food, but I might just not, and she would not understand. Do you know what I mean? And so she would maybe think I'm fussy or selfish potentially, but actually I just don't want the food. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's about re-looking at what is actually selfish and what is just boundaries.
And I think boundaries are usually clarified through your conversation. So I think if people really wanted to know if someone's being selfish or selfless, if the other person's up for it, they should have a conversation about it. Because that's the whole point. It's like, otherwise, how is someone meant to know what it is if they don't communicate?
What's your unwritten rules?
Yeah, exactly. What's the unwritten rule? Do you know what? I was playing around with this concept of having a T-shirt and writing my unwritten rules on there, all of them.
Do you know what I've done? Similar. I've written out
that's lit.
things on my phone that I need to remember.
Yeah, that's lit.
Do you want me to read them to you?
Yeah, go on.
Do you need to sort it now? Is this affecting you or someone else? Because what I'd love to do is something that's affecting someone else and I've sorted it for them and it's not even my beef. Have you got capacity for this? Massive one.
That's a big one.
Do you want to do this? Really big as well. Have you booked your next nice thing yet? Is this your reality or a reality? Because one thing I do is I absorb a lot of what's like, not said around me, but if someone I love says something to me and they're like, oh, that's going to be da-da-da, I will end up thinking that is that. And actually, like you say, no, it's not. That's not your reality. Have you done all you can? Then stop. Because I think so much of my time is spent like, oh, I need to do this, I need to, but I can't actually do anything more now, so I need to stop. Have they asked for your help? Then don't offer it. That's a big one for me. Forever offering help, which is unrequited. And then just a few reminders that I'm going to find a way. I always have and I always will. I've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. Unclench and breathe. And you only need permission from you.
I love that.
Thank you.
Would you say, like, are you big on self-care?
Yeah, but not in the obvious way. Like,
Yeah.
I only started using a face wash at night 2 months ago. But I know that, like, I need to go for a massage and I need to go for a massage.
No, but sometimes self-care is like, okay, like, I'm not saying that's just physical, it's also mental, but sometimes the self-care element of, like when's the last time you slowed down?
I'm getting better at doing that. But
Okay, did you slow
easy.
down at some point today?
Yes, I did.
You did. Okay, that's great. Because sometimes, so what I'm saying, and I obviously I don't mean it that way, but sometimes I forget to slow down. So for instance, like today, now since I asked that question, I haven't slowed down yet for a minute to just reflect and go like.
Well,
actually,
I think that's from you only do what you can do when you can do it, which sounds annoying, but I've only given myself permission to slow down when I've reached a few big things in my life recently, where now I'm like, yeah, I'm going to have a lie-in. I can. Do you know what I mean?
No, but you know what it is? Even if it's 5 minutes a day, even if it's 10 minutes a day, and I think that's what self-care is to me. Like, I just realized, I was like thinking, like, if I just slow down for a bit, just 5-10 minutes, reflected on my day or just chilled in silence, whatever it is, like, that's an element of self-care.
Definitely. It is, yeah.
And sometimes, like, people they think it's this big thing or this whatever. It's just like, just slowing down from all the noise of things that are happening and taking place.
And the key thing you said there was for you. That's what self-care is. And I think we try and the image of self-care is pushed as being facials or this or that. And that's not it for everyone. Do you know what I mean? For that single mum I'm talking about, it would be 5 minutes. That would be massively self-care for her.
Yeah.
Or like a drink on her own of something, like a tea on her own. That would be through the roof.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to look how everyone else's looks. It can just be something that's relevant to you.
Doesn't have to be a holiday all the way to Ghana and stuff, like, you know what I'm saying? But yeah.
Oh wow, someone's triggered.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I was just joking. But yeah, so before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you one more question. Yeah, and I think this is me. I'm just projecting this question out in general. But like, what do you think's like? Because I've been thinking about it a bit more often recently. What do you think is the meaning of life? And like, I know it's a big question, but like, I just wonder if people just slow down for a little bit and kind of like think about how incredible things around us are. Like, someone made it, even to the smallest detail, like even this like little wheel on the mic. or like even, I don't know, this blinking light, whatever it is.
Mm.
It's like someone's created that.
The meaning of life for me is connection.
Mm.
There's certain minutes or times in my life where I'm maybe having a conversation or having an experience, and in that moment I'm like so fulfilled on like a cellular level, where I'm like, rah, this is what life's about.
Is there like a gratitude moment, just kind of
Yeah.
like you're in this? But that's the thing. It's a state they enter, right? It's not like, it's not something that's naturally there, but something gets you into that state.
And I think the meaning
Yeah.
of life is potentially finding out for you what that is. How do you get to that state? And I think that is potentially the meaning of life for every single person, to get to that point where they know this is for me, influenced by like drink, drugs, or anything that's going to alter your state synthetically. How can you naturally, from your own ability, enter that state of like pure happiness, bliss, gratitude, whatever you want to call it? I think that's the meaning of life.
You know what? It's to get into that state through. So I used to do this thing back in the day. Can't remember how long ago, but I used to write down 3 things I'm grateful for. At the end of the day, and it's a commonly shared practice. And but I think the difficult thing is like everyone knows people can do that stuff, but doing on a regular. But the interesting thing was, so I was doing it for like the first 2 weeks. I wasn't like really seeing much like any like difference or anything like that. So I was just writing it down. Like 2 weeks in, I started noticing differences. And because what it was, because like from the day before, I'd be looking for things that I'm going to be grateful for, so I can write it in the evening. I would tune into some moments. I'm like, I'm really grateful for this at the moment. So I became aware of things.
You're
I'm
magnetizing it.
Yeah. So through the day, I'd be in a moment. So like sometimes be like, you know what, I really appreciate you for this and that. And just thinking, like, what's wrong with you? Like, it's just like, where's this coming from? But I'd really be in that moment of like real genuine appreciation and gratitude for either a person or a thing that's happening. But yeah, I'm going to start doing that again today.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it for me. And I feel like legacy is as well. I don't know if that's the meaning of life, but it's definitely a massive part of it, in my opinion. And that isn't just through kids. That's also through what you leave behind, like stuff like this, conversations, content, and yeah, stuff that like people can remember you by or attach to you.
Is it legacy or impact?
Both.
Yeah.
Both.
Because legacy, obviously, I think legacy is something that's, everlasting. But yeah, I get that. But yeah, so to wrap up, by the way, I could talk to you for days because I feel like there's so many things we could have covered as well. And we've probably been doing this for time, I guess. No. Oh, is it not? Oh, that's lit. Well, it's not.
7.
It's not lit, but it's lit at the same time. But either way, yeah. So one of the things we like to ask actually is two sort of questions. But one of them is if you was to promote something, so there's going to be 2 things. So one is something that doesn't belong to you. It can be like a movie or I don't know, a YouTube clip or a book, anything that's another person or another person's podcast, whatever it is. And one thing that belongs to you. So along those lines, is there anything you want to promote?
Thing that doesn't belong to me is a book called Psycho-Cybernetics by, I think his name's Maxwell, Maltz or something.
Yeah.
Matz, M-A-T-Z, and I'm reading it at the moment, and I really feel like it has changed.
So
Cybernetics.
Okay. Yeah.
And I really feel like it has changed or helped me change my mindset or just keep my mindset good. Do you know what I mean? It's one of them books where I'm going to read it again. And when I read it again, I feel like I'll be at a different place and I'll keep reading it. Do you know what I mean? It's one of them that you can keep referring back to and it will still be relevant because the teachings in there are still really, really key.
Can I say something on that?
Please.
I've just had a realization like 2 weeks ago, and it was around people usually talk about learning stuff. And people usually like talk about, they think that they meet the learning. But actually I think it's the other way around. I think the learning meets us based on where we're at.
Totally.
That's why some learning doesn't land at a certain point.
It relevant.
Because when we travel like a year or 2 years later on, we get a bit further and learning meets us there. But yeah, anyway, sorry.
No, I agree, yeah. So it's all about timing, isn't it? Like when it means something to you, that's when you're going to be like, oh, But until then, you'll just be like, yeah, and. So, yeah. And then the thing of me will be my podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, Maya's Minutes.
Maya's Minutes. Tune
Want
in.
everyone to listen. It isn't. I'm not on you lot's level yet with visual. So
There is no you lot's levels. and going back to the thing, it's like the whole thing of like watching what other people do is healthy.
And for me as well, like I like it being only audio because I feel like if you're listening and it's only audio, it's because you want to listen.
But you have like I've seen you have
Snippets.
visuals as well.
I do. I've got little snippets.
Yeah.
But that's another thing. I think people probably have another episode on this one day. But people don't talk about how difficult podcasting can be sometimes, and the production of it, and the expectation, and
mindset-wise, everything.
Yeah. And with it being so saturated, in order for you to get that exposure of your word, literally, it needs to be of a certain level, and there needs to be certain things, because there are people out there that will be doing that. And that's the clip I posted the other day, where there's content creators out there who are willing to do absolutely anything. So then we as consumers become entitled to it, because we're like, oh, well, I can go and watch another podcast which is giving me 8 visuals a minute. So why don't I go and watch that rather than yours, which is only 1 a day? So it's very hard to not get caught up in that and then get that overwhelm you, and then that blocks you from the actual big purpose, which is having these conversations.
You know what? That's the funny part. I've had temptations in the past where, so I'm trying to do something meaningful with these conversations. I want to have meaningful conversations that can potentially add value to the listener, and maybe help them see things from a different perspective. It's not always amazing. It's not always shit. It's just it's it's up and down. But regardless, I've had this moment where like I was thinking a couple of times, I was thinking, should I just do controversial stuff?
I know.
Because that's how people
that's
get.
How you blow, yeah.
Like I could literally start doing controversial stuff and start talking about maddest stuff, and I don't have an issue. As in, like I can easily do that.
Yeah.
But then I think it's much more difficult to just do you can call it the right thing or whatever, and not be worried about what the numbers are, and just what I'm saying, just find their own little community of like, cool.
Yeah.
He wants to tune in.
Something Heb said to me after we recorded the podcast I did on hers, which was actually where I met Aladdin. Don't stop being true to yourself. And I always think about that, and it was really like a gem that she gave me, because it was just at the time when I needed to hear it, again about timing. It's like every time I feel like I'm about to go, I would never go down that road fully, but every time I feel like I'm about to sell out, so to speak, from what I really want to be putting out there, I get a reminder that actually, no, what you're doing is what you should be doing, and you're speaking to the people you want to be speaking to. And now I've actually had a bit of a shift, because another thing for me similar is I've got some friends who are like influencers or whatever, and I could shout them and be like, let's come on the podcast and do a unsubstantial series about something, grow off their followers. But it's not the people that I want. They're not people I want to be listening to my stuff. People that I want are finding me. Do you know what I mean? And with yourselves as well, that's obviously the case for you too. So yeah, it's hard, but
that's why I like the stuff you talk about, because I think there's even through this process, like people are connecting and just they're going, like, cool, like this is kind of like along the lines of, what other people do or the mindset is and all of that stuff. But I can tell you one thing for sure, it's not popular. It's definitely not popular.
No,
I think there are like podcasts that are doing really well in terms of talking about meaningful things, but I think they have like a completely different niche.
Yeah. And it's also, I find people start going niche when they've not been niche and they've built up their listenership. It's rare for people to start niche. Do you know what I'm saying? Because it's going to be so much harder to grow, and it's going to be such a slower pace. But when you do that, every single person you've got will stick with you, because they've been there from day. So when you are ready, when you do, get that exposure or blow or whatever that means to you, then no one's going anywhere, and it's going to last way longer. Yeah.
And because people are there for, cool. Last but not least.
Yeah.
Did you know what's coming?
No.
No, you don't? Okay, cool. Last but not least. Huh?
No, it's not. I don't watch. I listen. I listen. Actually, funnily enough, where do you lot think I listen to you, typically?
Spotify.
No, I mean like doing what activity?
Oh, gym.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Is that common for people?
No, it's not common. Actually, it's quite rare. But I have. So basically, I go to gym to learn.
Okay.
Yeah. Like I'd literally go there to like listen to, I don't know, a podcast or like an audio book, and I make notes at the same time, working out at the same time. But my physical workout is a byproduct of me learning.
Okay.
So I'll go
I
to gym to learn.
typically don't listen to music in the gym as of about 6 months because I find I connect more with the exercise mind muscle connection when I'm not listening to music. However,
That's interesting.
I know podcasts
I love that.
podcasts and your podcast was the first one I did it with. I listened to that episode with I can't remember his name, it was a Colombian guy, I think, and he was talking about like the vaccine, and he lived in like Oxford or somewhere.
Oh, Rowney.
Yeah.
Rowney, Brazilian, yeah.
Yeah, oh, sorry, my bad.
Nice, it's fine. No, it's fine.
Yeah, and he'd just come back from Brazil, had he? Yeah.
Yeah.
I was listening to that episode, and I was surprised that like I was really getting that mind muscle connection whilst listening. So now I listen to you lot in the gym.
Oh, that's lit.
I know.
Congratulations.
I listened to the one you do with Black Man Traveller in the gym as well.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, that's couple. Do you know what? I'm gonna be fully honest, and I'm gonna put my hands up. Like, I think there are some episodes that are not that great.
Oh, raw.
But there's still something. There's still some people can take away from it. But just I feel like even as time goes on, like I'm still getting in my element of what this means and where we're kind of heading and all of that stuff. And yeah. And sometimes I feel like shooting a lot of the times it's like people run out of things to say. And do you know what it is? You know what my biggest problem is? What I've learned through this process and what I'm getting rid of through podcasting is if I had a conversation with one person about something, I feel like I can't talk about the same thing with another person.
Else,
and that's been the biggest challenge because I'm always like, I need to find something new. I need to find something new.
Really?
Which is not true.
See, my big thing I struggle with all the time to the point where, because I don't want to like complain about it, so I've solved it now. The visuals. I'm very much not that way inclined. I'm so not aesthetic, and I'm so like how I've lived my life is all about get it out there. Doesn't matter. Get it out there. And in life and work, that served me very well because I've been someone who produces and comes through and gets what they want. But in this game, it's not always the case. And Heba was the one who really like showed me. And she was like, what is the point of you posting a snippet that's not going to do numbers and you've gone and paid to be in a studio, you've gone and taken a time, whatever, you're just not going to get your word out there. And then my big thing that then comes to me is I don't want to compromise who I really am, because who I really am is a person who doesn't care. I go out, I don't wear makeup, do you know what I'm saying? And I don't want people to now see a version of me where I have put in more effort than I would, and then they think, oh, that's who she is, because that's not who I am. But then my friend was like, why are you going to not do those little things, which are unfortunately the only way you're going to get the podcast the exposure, and then risk the exposure that it could have got to be stunted just because you want to stay true to this thing that doesn't even matter kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, that's my hardest one with the podcast, and I've solved it by I've now got someone who's going to help me with doing the snippets for me.
Yeah, that's super lit.
Thank you.
I hope it's not Aladdin.
No, I tried with Aladdin and he was just like,
look at
here's the Adobe link, off you go.
look at the way it looks out. Where's that what you're saying? The Adobe link? Yeah. He sent that to me as well.
Do some YouTubing on that, and I was like, all right.
Yeah, I got Adobe installed now, so yeah, I haven't been on it for like 3 weeks. Yeah, but soon come. But yeah, the last question is so when you get, actually this is not the last question. No. It's the last question. It's the last question now. No, it's the last question now. Yeah, but this is not the last question because at some point we're gonna do another part anyways. Okay. So that's what I meant by that.
Cool.
Don't jump to conclusions.
That's fine.
But yeah. So when you get a chance to say something to 8 billion people, what would you tell them? Like, what message would you wanna give them?
Health is wealth, and don't believe what they tell you. And I don't just mean health is wealth in like a go gym, get gains way. I mean every aspect, physical, mental, spiritual. And again, if we all valued that more, a lot more would be better. Do you know what I mean? There'd be a lot less pressure from an obvious sense on like health services, that's A. And B, when you say health is wealth and you think of all facets, you think of your mental, for example. When I'm starting to feel stressed and when I'm starting to feel overwhelmed, if I actually listened to that and dealt with that as I need to, that would have such a lesser effect on so many knock-on things. Or if I feel like, again, generational trauma. Had there been capacity for people to actually deal with these things, then there'd be so much less carried down and therefore less problems. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I try to live my life in that, with that same sentiment. And when I say don't listen to what they tell you, because it's beneficial for people to have people not taking care of their health, because then they can get money. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I mean, there's a whole industry there. So like, coming from a youth work background, I've always actually said like I'd be happy to give up my job tomorrow if it means that the problem's solved.
oh yeah,
And I think it's kind of similar with like the health sort of industry as well. I think people should be happy to be like, you know what, if people start looking after themselves and they fix all their issues, I think they should be happy to switch to another,
agree.
you know,
Totally
career.
agree.
But that's not the case a lot of the times. But you know what? On that note, just before we wrap up, like I've heard there's been doctors who have actually been doing things differently now. So someone shared experience with me where someone went to GP recently, and instead of telling them, look, you take these tablets or whatever, they said, why don't you go to the park more? Why don't you sit down and, you know, just do something or whatever? So I was like, well, actually times are changing a little bit.
No, I think you know, as we have more access to things now as well, it's gonna but it needs to be done more on a bigger scale.
But yeah, on that note, I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely.
Yeah, it's been amazing, and I think we're gonna do a part 2 at some point.
Okay, defo, yeah.
Got more things to cover. So yeah.